Well, the first time I stepped into my large lecture hall to deliver my first year class for the first time, I was 100% worried about content. Could I explain the steps of sporic meiosis clearly? Did I know the difference between lobe-finned and ray-finned fish? But after a while, I looked up and realized that there were actually students there and that they looked pretty bored. So I thought there must be a better way to foster engagement in my classroom. And eventually I came up with a strategy I like to call show up, be present, and do stuff. So the show up part is pretty straightforward. Nowadays, I'm really focused on creating and fostering relationships in my classroom. So I show up a little bit early. I move into the lecture hall, move into the student seating, and choose a different group of students or student to sit with before each lecture. And just ask them a few questions, ask them their name, ask them what they did on the weekend, and just try to have a little conversation. Quite often they're shy and they don't want to look at me. And in that case, I answer the questions myself. And usually we end up having a little bit of a chit chat. And then I move on and I deliver my lesson. In the next class, I sit with a different group of students. And by the end of the semester, I've usually made it to almost the whole class. And it's just a little way for me to, I guess, bridge the distance between the person at the front of the room and the students taking the class. And it's a really nice way to get to know my students a little bit. Because I teach in biology, there's usually a lab component to the course as well. So I try to show up to each lab section each week and just walk through and again, see the students in a little bit of a different setting. And it's another chance for me to get to know them a little bit. So the next part of my model is the be present part. So again, when I first started teaching, I had a difficult time gauging student understanding. Were they understanding what I was saying? Were they understanding the concepts? And quite often when I asked questions in these large classes, students really didn't want to speak up. I think, they're quite shy about speaking up in front of large groups of their peers. So I came up with the idea of bio buddies. And on my first lecture, I have the students turn to the person next to them or find somebody else sitting on their own, introduce themselves. And from then on, that is their bio buddy. And it changes a little bit throughout the semester, but it's actually remarkable. Most times that first introduction sticks and those bio buddy partnerships remain constant throughout the semester. So now I can pose a question and I can ask the students to discuss the question in their bio buddy. And I wasn't really sure the first time it was going to work. I thought they were going to talk about things other than the biology question that I posed, but it works remarkably well. And they talk about the question or the concept in a small group with their bio buddy who they know. And then we can come back together as a large group, and they're more likely to engage in a conversation in that large setting, having already discussed and sort of hashed it out in their bio buddy partners. And I find that it works really well. And then I take the two bio buddies and I joined that pair with another pair, and that makes a bio group. And if I have any more in-depth questions or higher order questions, I'll have a bio group tackle it. And really, we spend a lot of time in the first few weeks practicing moving between the students sort of listening to my lecture or my stories, moving into their bio buddies, and then moving into their bio groups. And that movement becomes really important for the last part of my model, which is do stuff. So I first would like to say that I do lecture. I do give a straight up lecture. I sort of view my lectures as more of a story. I tell a biology story, and hopefully it is engaging. But a lecture is still sort of passive learning. The students are listening and I'm speaking. And so I wanted to find a way to make my large first year courses a bit more interactive, a bit more engaging. So I started to look around for ideas. And then I came across the Doors Open sessions that the Teaching Center runs, and I attended one of Jan Newberry's anthropology courses, and she used team-based learning, or TBL. And so I started to use this and modify it a bit for my large first-year courses. And so basically, I create flipped content, and students come to the assigned day having already learned that content that I've posted to Moodle. And they write an individual assessment. It's a multiple choice question, and they get a certain amount of time, and that's the first part. But they then move into their bio groups. They're familiar with their bio groups, having worked in that group before quite a bit already. And they answer that same multiple choice question. But in this case, each bio group gets one scratch card, and they have to come up with a consensus as a group. So as you can imagine, this involves a lot of talking, a lot of debating. Students are having to justify what answer they think is correct. And it really works well to solidify those ideas, to have something a bit more engaging and active than the students just listening to me. And then ultimately their grade is 50% of their individual assessment and 50% of their group assessment. And it's just a nice way to move beyond or in addition to that traditional lecture content. So that's sort of my model: show up, be present, and do stuff. And I find that that works really, really well. I get to know my students. My large class is a bit more engaging, a bit more active, and I'm finding students really enjoy it.